Welcome back, S'mores, to another episode of Beyond the Campfire. If you are new, I am one of your hosts, Stephen the Indian, alongside Will the Cowboy. We are a cowboy and Indian that talk about ghosts, spooky stories, cryptids, conspiracy theories, all the like. So, if you have not listened to us before, be sure to find us. You can find us on Instagram, X, and TikTok at Beyond Campfire Podcast or at Beyond Campfire. So be sure to connect with us there. And today we have another spooky story for you.
Mm-hmm.
Will, what are we talking about today?
Well, this is going to be actually this is a really interesting episode. I think for the first time, that I think this is a first for us. I mean, it fits in the other categories. You know, like we got the main categories, and this is obviously a haunting tale we're talking about. But I think this is the first time that this type of haunt has happened for us. And yeah, so we're going to be talking about the shipwreck of the SS Princess Sophia. So we're going to kind of start our story, but in order to do that, there's going to be a little bit of history. I got to tell you, some geography. We're going to be all over the place. But to start off, I'm going to ask you a question, Stephen. So we're going to start with the geography and like the layout of things. So, do you know how people got into Alaska way back then? So, way back then is like the early 1900s.
I want to guess boats because you'd have to go through Canada otherwise, no?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a lot of, we'll talk about the mountains and stuff though. But yeah, back then the way that it would do is you travel by boat, train, dog sled, hike. There were no cars, even though cars were a thing back then. They just couldn't handle that type of terrain, and there was no major roads. So the way this would kind of work for most of like whenever you look up like the Alaskan gold rush, right? When everybody was going in the Yukon to go get gold, the way people would get into the Alaskan wilderness is you could go through, you could go out and around and up to Alaska, but that was a little bit dangerous, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But what you would do is you would board a steamship, and that steamship you would then like leave like maybe Vancouver, and it would go up in this thing called the Inside Passage. Talk about that in a second. Up to Skagway, and then once you got up to Skagway, you then take the White Passage and Yukon Route Railroad. That would take you through Yukon and kind of up towards Alaska, a little bit further north, and then from there, you would maybe even take maybe a smaller riverboat, maybe a dog sled, or you might just hike it in. And that's basically how people got to Alaska back then. I mean, there was no planes. There were boats, but we'll talk about that in just a second. So for a lot of people, and I think these routes still, like the Yukon, the White Passage and Yukon route still run today. That railroad still operates. You can ride the train today. So there were ships that would take you further, like the Seaward. So to lay it on a map of Alaska, if any of you know where Juneau is, do you know where Juneau, Alaska is?
No idea.
So, whenever you look at Alaska, rough shape, there's that little tailpiece that touches Canada that kind of comes down a little bit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So in that tailpiece, that's where the inward passage is. And at the tip of that inward passage is Skagway. And then further down from there is Juneau.
Gotcha. Okay, that helps me kind of roughly locate it in my mind.
So when you look at the main mass of Alaska, towards Anchorage is where Seaward is, which that wasn't found until 1903. The gold rush ended in 1904. So Seaward wasn't really used much during the gold rush. But the only way to get to Seaward at the time was taking a ship such as the SS Roosevelt, which was an icebreaker, because the ocean would freeze and you'd have ice, and it was dangerous. So that's why a lot of people want to stick to the Inside Passage. Any questions so far? Because I'm fixing to explain the Inside Passage, but
okay, I was going to say that was going to be my next question is about this inward passage. But okay, so before modern times, before we had all our luxuries that we have today, this kind of was the way to get into Alaska, more or less.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
because today we fly planes, but back then, I mean, 1903. I think the Wright brothers flew that little plane in like 1904.
Right.
So planes
Yeah,
were an
I-
option.
you're not getting to Alaska by plane.
No, you're not even getting to it by car because the mountains are terrible, and you've got to hike or river boats or whatever. So yeah.
Definitely a terrain for sure. So
So to kind of explain to you what the inside passage is, so between Vancouver, you know where Vancouver Island is, right? Okay, so from Vancouver Island north to Skagway, there's all these little channels, all these little water channels, and they're called fjords. And fjords are long and narrow sea inlets created by glaciers. So the way it works was glaciers would come down from Yukon, Alaska, and as they came down in these old times, they would carve out these inlets in the water. So think about it like this. Here in Georgia, we've got the Great Barrier, the Barrier Islands, where we got all these different like little islands up along down the coast. They kind of had the same thing, and inside of those were these rivers and these channels and these like carved out canals from glaciers way back then. And so the way it would work is you would have this could create these fjords that were protected by some islands, and so you could have a safe passage without the conditions of, say, the ocean. Like you wouldn't have the rough seas of the ocean. You can have a more gentle, calming pass going up to Skagway and then going into Alaska. And along the route of the Inward Passage, you had a lot of smaller little towns. You had like Juneau, Skagway. There's a couple of little where they would start little ports, and you'd have supplies would go up and down. You'd have people go up and down. Mail would go up and down. Like this was the main way people were traveling back then. Any questions?
seems very efficient. I mean, again, given the terrain that is the wilderness of Alaska, as much as you could make a effective means of getting there and shipping stuff, that certainly seems. Yeah, I mean, take advantage, right? You said these glaciers came down and kind of carved out these paths.
Yeah,
Very, very convenient. Yeah, so
convenient.
take advantage of what nature has already done. Cool, I like it.
Mm-hmm. So to kind of start the story of the Sophia, we're actually going to travel back a couple years before it to 1883, where there's a company that was created called the Canadian Pacific Navigation Company, or CPNC. They operated steamships on the coast of British Columbia and the Inside Passage. So obviously before the gold rush, but this was a company that was running ships. They would eventually be sold in 1901 to the Canadian Pacific Railway, and this is basically where our story begins. So Canadian Pacific Railway was the people who created the Sophia. They're the ones that owned her. And it kind of explains some of the ships. So a lot of ships did go through the Inside Passage. The predominantly main ones that went through were called coastal liners. If you don't know what a coastal liner is, if you've heard of an ocean liner, then you probably can connect the dots on what a coastal liner is. Ocean liners stuck to the ocean, coastal liners stuck to the coast. For example, the reason why I say about coastal is because the ship that we're talking about, the SS Princess Sophia, she was actually licensed to sail only 50 miles off the coast. So she couldn't go further past 50 miles. The reasons why these ships were used and not like a ferry or something is they could handle the severe ocean conditions, but they were able to stay mostly inside the passage. So while, yes, the passage was predominantly safe, the reason why you wouldn't use like a ferry or some smaller riverboat is because these type of ships were built to withstand ocean conditions, but they weren't obviously going to the ocean, so they were able to withstand all this. Now, a group of these were called pocket liners. So a pocket liner is another ship term. And this is obviously the SS Princess Sophia was a pocket liner, which meant that she offered ocean liner, like she offered what an ocean liner could have, like the amenities of an ocean liner, but on a much smaller scale. So like an ocean liner, but pocket sized.
Okay,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
pocket liner, perfect term to use for that. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
So our ship today was part of the CPR's Princess Fleet. So they ran a whole bunch of these different ships. And I think from what I researched, whenever I looked at the Princess Fleet, it looked like it was another company. So I think either CPR sold out the Princess Liner and someone else picked up the Princess. But yeah, so Princess Line. So the Sophia was built by McLaughlin and Company, and it was based out of Paisley, Scotland. They also built her sister ship, the SS Princess Mary. She had a double steel hull. And if you don't know what a double hull means, like with a ship, if the Titanic had a double hull, it probably would have survived its sinking. Basically, a double hull is, instead of just having one single sheet of steel, you have two, and there's like that way. If it punches one layer, it's not going to punch the other, and the ship will stay be fine. Let's see. She could handle more than the inside passage. This was demonstrated by the Vancouver Island storms that she operated in. She had a full wireless communicator. Like she was jazzed up, man. Now they say that she wasn't as luxurious as she was as her other ships, but she was pretty comfortable, especially with the first class. She had a forward observation lounge, and it wasn't just any observation lounge. This thing was paneled with maple wood. So you're on a Canadian ship, you've got to have maple wood.
Hey, I know our Canadian friends really like their syrup, so maple, this makes sense.
Building everything out of maple.
Yeah.
Drink maple, you build maple.
When you said jazz, I thought of that quote from the B movie where he says, "You like jazz."
You like jazz? We jazzed it up.
But I'm getting a picture of the ship. Very luxurious.
Oh yeah.
Kind of place. Okay, got it.
Yep. So she had a 112 seat dining room with large windows in first class, so you could see the coast, see all the beautiful scenery. She was launched in November 1911 and completed in 1912. She was then brought to America. So she was built in Scotland, and then they had to bring her over to America. And through that, she had to go around the Cape Horn. You know what the Cape Horn is, right? Yeah, the little bit of South Africa. And the guy who actually was sailing her to British Columbia also sailed the SS Princess Adelaide and the SS Princess May. So when she was first brought up to British Columbia, she was actually a coal-burning ship. But when she got there, they retrofitted her out to be based off oil. So any other questions?
So you have this pocket liner, very, very luxurious, making its way to Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no question. So, well, I'll ask this about how many people would be on this ship, because I know you said it's a pocket liner, so it's not as big as some other ones. But how?
No. Let me see. I think I have that here because I got like a lot of the different. She had a crew of 73.
Oh, very small.
And her capacity, she could have 250 passengers, but she could carry more with special permission, where her capacity was set at about 500.
Gotcha. My mind was very tempted to think like Titanic levels. But I'm like, nah.
No. Like I said, like Titanic was an ocean liner. This was a coastal liner.
Yeah,
she was
right.
a lot smaller. It's actually funny that you do bring up the Titanic because do you know what she was actually, because of the sinking, do you know what they actually call her?
What do they call her?
They call her the Titanic of the West Coast.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm.
Not a title you want to claim. But...
No.
Okay.
So I'll kind of go a little bit more into a little bit of the history of the Princess Sophia, and then we'll kind of shift our focus into the final moments of the Sophia. And I actually learned there's some really cool research that like this was a ship that the amount of research I've done, I don't think I've ever done for an episode, because I was looking up fjords, I was looking up how do they get to Alaska, I was looking up all kinds of things. So once she arrived to British Columbia and got outfitted with, what they wanted for her, that would be her oil. She was put on a route from Victoria to Prince Rupert. However, the next summer, CPR basically told her she's going to run every 2 weeks, once every 2 weeks from Victoria to Skagway. And she would alternate this with her sister ship, the Princess May. And sometimes along that route, she might stop in Prince Rupert. Sometimes she was occasionally diverted to other routes. There was a time she went to Bellingham, Washington in the United States. Let's see. So as I said, she was built in 1912 and brought over. And as we know, in 1914, the Great War started. So when Canada entered that, because of the disruption and the economics from the war, there was a sharp decline in business for the CPR's fleet, and a number of vessels, including the Sophia, they were temporarily taken out of service in November of 1914. However, Sophia did, along with other CPR vessels, transport troops raised for service in Europe. And so before she sank, she actually had another accident. On September 12th of 1918, she struck the United States Bureau of Fisheries fishery patrol vessel, the USFS Aucklet, while it was stationed in Juneau, Alaska. Don't know really what the Princess got. All it says is that the Aucklet suffered significant damage to the deck house.
So this thing was already kind of having some accidents already before I guess the big one that's going to happen.
Yeah, it really just had that kind of like that one big sort of accident.
Okay, I gotcha.
But that was about it.
U.S. fisheries.
It's actually interesting because that boat stayed in service until the ship that she hit stayed in service till 1940, and then in 1940 it got converted into a fish and wildlife service boat till the 50s.
Really, really cool. So long history for the ship after it then.
Yeah. So now we're going to kind of get a little bit into the final voyage of the Sophia. Then we'll get into the hauntings. And then we've got a really cool ChatGPT story. I think it's one of the coolest ones, a two-parter. So on October 23rd, 1918. So you remember how like in August it hit the boat? Like 2 months later, it's on its final voyage, like fixing to go down.
Not a lot of time between these.
No. So it departed Skagway, Alaska at 2:10, which is more than 3 hours behind schedule. She was due to stop at Juneau and Wrangell, Alaska, the next day. And then on October 25th, she was going to then be in Ketchikan, Alaska, and Prince Rupert. And then on the 26th, she was going to be in Alert Bay. And then on the 27th of October, my birthday, she's actually going to be in Vancouver. On this day, she had a crew of 75 and about 268 passengers, which included families of troops serving overseas, miners, and crews of sternwheelers. If you don't know what a sternwheeler is, it's like a paddle boat that had finished operations for the winter. Out of that passenger list, there were 50 women and children that were on board, including the wife and children of gold prospector John Beaton. John Beaton was a businessman whose discovery of gold in Flat Alaska began the Iditarod gold rush. So there's different gold rushes. This guy was one of those that kind of started one of the gold rushes. Which I think if I'm trying to remember, because I have there's a story I'm going to tell about this ship in just a little bit, and I wonder if John, make sure I got that right. Yeah, I think it was this guy. Just trying to make sure. Sorry. Any questions while I'm looking for this?
Yeah, I mean, none that like super come to mind. I guess really the tantalizing part is the actual tragedy and then the hauntings afterward. So history portion is good and fine. I was a history major, so I know I in particular love it. But history, more or less is, and again, I know it depends on who writes it, but it's more or less straightforward. It's the parts where like the interesting stuff happens that you get conspiracy theories and other theories and things like that. So far, pocket cruiser going through Alaska. It's got this crew, and as the name Titanic of the West suggests, something bad is going to happen. So
yeah, sorry. I thought there's a guy we're going to be talking about in just a little bit, but it's not.
sure.
It's not John Beaton. So 4 hours after it left Skagway, so it was going from Skagway down. So it's going north to south. So 4 hours after it left. So remember, it's already 3 hours behind schedule. It's finally leaving, and then 4 hours after leaving Skagway, it was proceeding south down the Lynn Canal. That was another one of those canals created by the glaciers. The Sophia basically came upon a blinding snow driven by a strong and rising northwest wind. Captain Locke navigated the canal at full speed, possibly in an attempt to make up the time. Let's see. But due to the prevailing snow conditions, the crew was required to use dead reckoning by blowing the ship's whistle and making calculations as to the location within the canal, basically based on the echo of the whistle return. So they were kind of using echolocation in a way because they couldn't see because the snow was so bad, and they're using their whistle as like echolocation. So ahead of the Sophia, there was a rock called the Vanderbilt Reef. The tip of an underwater mountain that rose 1,000 feet from the bottom of Lynn Canal at high tide. So ahead of the ship was the Vanderbilt Reef, which was an underwater mountain where it would rise from about 1,000 feet from the bottom of the Lynn Canal to the surface. At high tide, the rock might be awash or almost invisible under swells. However, at low tide, it might look like a low table with its highest point standing 12 feet above the water at extreme low tide. At the time, Vanderbilt Reef was at extreme high tide and was unlit. So, at the time of the ship having its problems, couldn't see, using echolocation. There's this reef under the water because it was high tide. It's almost like an iceberg. You know, like when you look at an iceberg, you just see this a little bit at the top, but then there's this stuff at the bottom you can't see.
Right.
Just imagine there was no top to the iceberg, and there's just this rock hiding up underneath the water.
Okay, gotcha.
Let's see. The channel at this point was about 6.5 miles wide. However, the presence of the reef being there, it narrowed main navigation channels to about 2.5 miles. The area with deep water strong, so on its east side. The east side was the area with deep water, strong currents, rocky cliff faces, narrow fjords, and it's very dangerous to ships. So as they were trying to, like I said, can't see, got this big rock coming up on you. And as they're going through, the Princess Sophia drifted about 1.25 miles off course. And on October 24th at 2 o'clock in the morning in 1918, the Sophia struck ground hard on the Vanderbilt Reef. So can't see, you're going through, it's very tricky. And then at 2 o'clock the morning of the next day, you hit the reef. They were 54 miles south of Skagway when this happened. There was actually a letter recovered from the body of a passenger, Orius W. McQueen. He described the scene on board just after the grounding. He said 2 women fainted, and one of them got herself into a black evening dress and didn't worry about who saw her putting it on. Some of the men, too, kept life preservers on for an hour or so and seemed to think there was no chance for them. So,
dang, that's really.
Yeah. Here's where it's going to get and this is where it's going to get a little crazy, because it hits the reef, right? And you're thinking, okay, yep, that's the end. Ship's going to sink. So the wireless operator on the Sophia sent out a distress call immediately after this. However, back in those days, remember how I told you that it was wireless? Well, yeah. Wireless signals back then were not as strong as they are now. Like right now, I could pick up my phone. I could pick up my phone and I could call someone in Juneau, Alaska, and it'd be fine. If a ship was sinking and they called me on my phone, I'm pretty sure I could get it pretty quick. But back then, that wasn't the case. The distress signal could not reach much further than Juneau. So now, like with a cell phone, you can call anyone around the world. But for the Sophia, because of where she got hit, the furthest she could reach was Juneau. And Juneau wasn't like what it is today. So they hit the rock at 2 o'clock. And as soon as they hit it, like I said, he immediately sent out a distress signal. You want to know what time that distress signal finally reached Juneau?
Yeah.
2:15 a.m. 15 minutes after they ran aground.
Sheesh.
That was when the CPR shipping agent got the news, and he immediately began organizing a rescue flotilla from the boats in the harbor. High tide came at 6 o'clock on October 24th. So 2 a.m. hit the rock, 2:15 distress signal was released. 6 o'clock that morning, 4 hours after they hit it, high tide kind of came in. but it was still stuck on the reef. So the ship hit the reef at 2 o'clock. 4 hours later, which, by the way, the Titanic, if we're going to call this thing the Titanic of the West Coast, Titanic sank in like 3 hours. So the Sophia has not sunk yet. She's just stuck on a rock. At low tide came about noon. And so the wind and waves forced Princess Sophia even further up onto the reef. So she's stranded on the rock, and then low tide comes, and then the wind blows her further up the rock.
Are they like waiting for rescue at this point?
Yeah, they're just waiting for rescue. And I'm
got
going to tell you why, because you might be wondering why didn't they get in lifeboats, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
There's actually something I found out, and it's part of my research. I'm going to get to it in just a second. That would probably explain why they didn't evacuate. So then it forced it even more up onto the reef, but because of the double hull, even though it was stuck on this reef, the ship wasn't going to sink because the double hull wasn't penetrated. And then as low tide came in more on the reef, the entire hull of the Princess Sophia was completely out of the water. So she was literally just grounded at this point, just sitting above the water. Let's see.
So they. Okay, let me make sure I'm getting the timeline right. So they hit the rock at about
2 o'clock in the morning.
2:15, they're on the rock.
Yeah.
Low tide comes in around 6 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been there for, I guess, where we're at on the timeline right now. They've been there for about 4 hours.
Yep.
Okay, gotcha.
And then 6 hours later at noon, low tide, the tide goes out, and they're just sitting on this rock above the water. So they've been sitting there now for 10 hours. So their barometer was rising, which indicated possible improvement in the weather. They were hoping, and then with the next high tide at 1600, the seas were so rough that any evacuation would be hazardous. Locke chose to wait to see if he could get the vessel off, which proved impossible. So at about 1600, high tide came in. All this weather was getting bad. The captain's like, listen, I'm not going to risk evacuating everyone because this could be very dangerous. I'm just hoping that if we wait, maybe the ship will get loosened, and then I can get off of it and I can just sail right out. No problem. However, this would be impossible, as I said, because in order to do it, they probably would need either 2 or 3 tugboats to kind of help pull her off the reef.
I see.
And then again, like I said, the passengers can now be evacuated from the vessel without life-threatening danger. So at low tide, so when low tide had come in, the Sophia was surrounded on both sides by exposed rock. Can't really do anything there. Then at high tide, the rock was gone, but there were swells that would basically cause a lifeboat to strike the rocks as the wave pounded it up and down. So nothing you can do. I will mention later, though, about why they also decided not to evacuate, because a lot of it was probably fear. So let's see. Just reading through my notes. Any questions so far?
So they're just kind of waiting to be rescued. They've been here for several hours. When, I mean, not to be like morbid or anything, but when does everybody start to die, more or less?
Well, I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
So during all this, let's see. Apparently, she had been actually severely damaged during the crashing into the reef. Sorry, I'm trying to read through my notes. So it says here, let's see. Sorry. So yeah, there's a lot of desperation. Apparently, the Sophia had been seriously damaged striking the reef. She had a hole in her bow that water ran in and out of at a rate that Davis estimated at 200 or 300 gallons per minute. And they were still finding no way to get anybody off the ship. all they could really do is kind of wait to see if the weather would get better enough for evacuation. Let's see. So I will say this. So Captain Locke was pretty actually confident at this time about it that two vessels had come up. There's the Estebeth and the Amy, and they were basically getting pounded by the weather. And they're like, "Hey, we like try their best and everything." And Captain Locke actually came on the megaphone and was so confident in his ship that he said, "The Sophia was safe. Just go back to harbor. Get out of the weather. Go back to harbor. We're fine." Let's see.
Famous last,
Yeah.
maybe.
So then at 2:00 on October 24th, this is PM. Let's see. There was another patrol vessel that did not see word. So there's a patrol vessel. It was a United States Navy World War One. It was the USLHT Cedar. It did not receive word about this until 2:00 the next day. So, like I said, they've been on this rock for 12 hours, and finally, the Coast Guard or the Navy's getting word of this. Let's see. So that ship was able to get in wireless contact with Captain Locke, and then he decided to go rescue them or try to. And so the captain of the USS Cedar had asked Captain Locke if he wanted to try to evacuate passengers that night. Locke told him that the wind and the tide were too strong and it'd be better for the rescue ships to anchor and wait until daylight. When Ledbetter arrived at my notes are in military time, so give me just a second. At 8:00 that night, he found 3 large vessels that would include the schooner King and Wing, and it arrived at 18:20 or 6:00, and then about 15 smaller fishing vessels were at the scene that evening. So you had all these ships coming in. They're trying to come in. They're trying to rescue the thing, right?
Okay.
And let's see. So then they finally were trying to evacuate them that Friday morning on what day was this? Yeah, so Friday morning on October 22nd. Oh, wait, why does it say that? So the Friday afterwards, they're still trying to rescue them. And it's not going very well. And eventually they actually ended up, let's see, sorry. Let's see. So eventually, it was just this kind of back and forth. Ships coming in, trying to save them, not working, leaving, going. Eventually, though, the ship started to list and started to lean on its side.
Okay.
And water was coming in quick. So that was on October 25th. They sent out a wireless message saying, "Ship foundering on reef, come at once." Ledbetter of the USS Cedar immediately went out there to try to get to them.
Sure. Yeah.
Along with the King and Wing. And they said, "I'm going out there to try to locate him. If the snow should clear up, you come out and relieve me." But then at 5:20 p.m., wireless operator David Robinson stated, "For God's sake, hurry, the water's coming into my room." And after that, the Cedar replied, "We're coming, save your batteries." The operator then replied back, "All right, I will. You talk to me, so I know you're coming." This is the last wireless message from the Sophia. So then after that, the ship had basically sank, and all 329 passengers were killed. And sorry, I was trying to get through, the timeline was messy. Sorry about that. It was a little
Sure. Yeah.
here.
I was gonna say, man, we're 34 minutes in, and
I know there's a lot going on. So the ship sank. So the ship sank.
Okay.
And after the ship sank, the rescuers got there and they're like, where's the ship? You know how they knew where the ship was?
How?
The only thing sticking out was the mast.
Oh, yikes.
The whole ship sank, killing all 329 people on board.
Awful.
So
that's awful.
The reason why no one evacuated is a lot of people said there was some fear because someone I've read on Reddit talked about it. And so apparently there's a tragedy before called the Clallam, where basically the Clallam had kind of the same issues. They evacuated 3 lifeboats. All those lifeboats capsized and drowned everyone. And so the ship stayed afloat long enough for rescuers to come. So part of the reason why they're like, well, if we put the lifeboats out, people are going to get hurt. Let's just do like Clallam did, and just sit here, just sit here. And obviously the ship
So
sank.
there had been some fear from earlier.
Yeah, there's some fear from earlier, and they didn't really want to try anything. It's so all the life was lost on board the ship. Everyone died except for one. There was one that survived. It was a dog. His name was Tommy. He lived, but the way that the passengers died too, it wasn't like a quick death. Because when she hit the reef, the engines had leaked oil, and so all this oil had kind of come out. And so it seems like when people were trying to swim away from the ship after she went down, they just started inhaling oil and just drowned. What's even worse about this is that when the ships got there, when the Cedar got there, along with the other two, the issues were you would be expecting, okay, it was a bad wreck. You'd expect to see oil, bodies floating on the water, all of this, but you didn't because of the tide and the currents and because of the weather. It basically blew all the debris and the bodies away. So they knew no one survived, but it took them months to recover all the bodies. And think about how that's going to look. Like, like let's say it's getting close to summertime and you're finding these bodies and they've been in the water for, several months. How's that going to look? There's actually one interesting story that I found
Go ahead.
about this guy, and it's in the newspaper they had, where this guy almost sank his whole entire fortune to find his wife. Like, because his wife was on board the ship, and he really almost went bankrupt trying to find her. And they found her body finally that summer, but as you can tell, it wasn't a pretty sight.
I was gonna say.
And so to get into the hauntings, the wreck is haunted, but I did say there's two parts. There's two hauntings. So after the ship had sank, bodies were then transported to Juneau drugstore, and Juneau drugstore at the time was used as like a temporary morgue. And that was where you would have the women work on the women bodies, trying to identify them, trying to embalm them, get them ready to be shipped out. Because a lot of the stores on Fremont Street, where the drugstore is, were used to store bodies so that people could come and get their loved ones after the shipwreck. And so to this day, like a lot of divers say that when you go down the wreck, it's very eerie. There are marine life, but it's very like there's no color, and it's just very, a lot of people get this eerie feeling, this eerie sensation that something's like watching them. The Juneau drugstore, I was reading an article where this one woman who works there, there's like a door, a steel door, and it says the room above it. And downstairs is like the basement. Now it's used for like storing snow shovels, stuff like that. But back in the day, that drugstore, that was where the morgue was. And she's like, I don't like going down there by myself. I just don't. And so people hear footsteps, there's just all kinds of hauntings going on there. So any thoughts, comments?
So all the people on the ship died, minus the dog, right? So this dog survives. This it's a drugstore. It's a what is it?
It's technically like like a drugstore, like your CVS.
And the basement of it was kind of used as this makeshift morgue.
Mm-hmm. So they could bring in the bodies, identify the bodies, get them ready to be shipped home.
And that is this where the hauntings were happening as you were?
Yeah, they were. Some of the hauntings are happening in the drugstore. A majority of them are in the drugstore. Now there could be some that are on Fremont Street just because some of the other buildings were used to store bodies, but majority of the hauntings are in the two locations: the shipwreck and the drugstore.
Sure. Okay. Good. Any more ghastly tales before we get into theories and the ChatGPT story?
Well, really, there's no theories.
Just reports of ghosts.
It's just reports of ghosts, some hauntings.
I see why you dropped out the history section. So
what?
Huh? I see why you took out the history section, because I was like, man, there's a lot of history.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, like going over the shipwreck, because it was like I said, it literally hit the reef on the 23rd. They were stuck on that reef for 2 days before they finally sank.
Yeah. I don't know. It's always sad when like kids die, right? So just hearing like
I said, there were 50 women and children on board.
Right. Yeah.
and none of them survived.
It's sad when anybody dies, but
Yeah,
in particular,
I think what I think well, I think it also depends on how someone dies too. Like a lot of people that die a natural death, it's sad, but it's like okay, they live their life. But here it's like
it's an awful way to die.
this is awful. Like imagine being like oh, we can't evacuate you, so you're sitting there for 2 days. And then the ship finally goes over, and as soon as it does, you try swimming away, and you like just drown in oil.
I wish we could ask the dog what had happened, but
Well, we know. I mean, like I said, we know what happened. They hit the reef, and then just the tides and the winds and everything just kind of kept beating on the ship to where it just took on so much water it just couldn't stay afloat. I mean, just
Or, cool. Well, I guess we can do our ChatGPT story, and this will definitely be one of our longer episodes. But
yeah. I'm sorry. I had like so many tabs open for my notes, and I thought I did good, but then I'm having flashbacks to Roanoke.
I was gonna say, yeah, like this is feeling like
This is probably going to be up there with worst episodes. Like number one is Roanoke. This is probably going to be number two.
Hey, maybe the ChatGPT story can save us. So,
Maybe.
all right, go ahead.
All right. So episode 8, the silent wreck of the Princess Sophia. Some tragedies aren't loud. Some whisper. Sahil. It was a gray morning in Anchorage when we boarded the seaplane. Me, Sahil, 2 camera bags, a pair of hydrophones, and a whole lot of dread. Most cases take us into woods, swamps, caves. This one took us into the coldest water in North America. The email had been simple. If you want a real mystery, investigate the Princess Sophia. Something's wrong down here. Signed, Alaska Marine Archaeology Society. No details, no briefing, but enough to get us there. As the plane skimmed over Lynn Canal, the channel where the ship went down, fog hugged the mountains like old sorrow. The water below was black, glassy, and still. Too still. Even Sahil, who hated seaplanes, leaned toward the window. Will, something happened here. Shipwrecks happen all the time, I said. Not like this one. He was right. The Princess Sophia didn't sink gently. She struck Vanderbilt Reef and stayed lodged there, trapped for almost 40 hours while the passengers waited. When the storm finally broke, her boiler exploded. When the rescues arrived, there wasn't a single survivor. Not a single body left aboard. It looked as though the ocean had swallowed them straight off the deck. And that's where we were headed. Part 2, the dive. We met our contact, Captain Hearn, at a small dock north of Juneau. Weather beaten, beard like an icy bush, eyes so pale they almost blended into the fog. You boys really want to see her? He asked, handing me a dry suit. That's the idea. Most folks don't come back the same. Sahil shot him a look. From diving near a shipwreck? Hearn leaned closer. No. From what they hear down there. He tapped the side of his head. Voices, screams, crying, sometimes singing. Sahil swallowed. Ghosts don't survive underwater, he muttered. Son, Hearn said, spirits don't need air. We hit the water just after noon. The world went cold in a way only Alaska can do. A biting, ancient cold that sank into bone and soul. Our descent was slow, careful. Visibility limited to a few yards. Then the fog beneath the water parted, and she appeared. The Princess Sophia, resting on her side, hull cracked open like a great sleeping creature. Her bow was draped in kelp like funeral cloth. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't a wreck. It was a grave. Part 2, the first voice. We split up, keeping a 30-foot tether line between us. I moved along the starboard hull, running sonar and EMF readings. Sahil stayed near the bow, recording audio. For 20 minutes, it was quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard it. A tapping. Soft, rhythmic, like someone knocking on metal from inside the ship. I froze, pressed my glove to the hull. Tap, 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 tap. Morse code? Impossible, but 3 letters. SOS. My suit felt suddenly too small. Hell, you hearing this? I said into the comm. Static. More tapping. Then a whisper slid through my headset, watery and distant. Help us. I jerked back, heart hammering. Sahil, respond. Nothing. Only breathing. Not mine. Someone else's. The water around the bow shifted. Visibility sinking to nothing but pale haze. Shapes moved inside the fog. Too many shapes. Hands? No. People. Silhouettes drifting just beyond reach. Sahil's voice finally cracked through. Will, I'm not alone. The fear in his tone snapped me into motion. I swam towards the bow, kicking hard. He floated near the railing, staring ahead in absolute horror. A woman stood on the deck, or what was left of her. Her dress drifted like seaweed. Her skin was gray as river silt. Her eyes, dark, empty sockets, were fixed directly on Sahil. Her mouth opened. Bubbles streamed out, forming words. Cold. So cold. It hurts. Sahil trembled, backing up slowly. I think she thinks I'm clergy, he whispered. She keeps reaching for me. I grabbed his arm. We're going. But she lifted her hand, and the water around her screamed. Not just her voice, hundreds. Men, women, children. A choir of the drowned. My vision blurred. The water felt heavier, pulling at us, dragging. Will, something's taking the current. Then one of the silhouettes lunged. A hand, bony and white, burst out of the murk toward my helmet. A shockwave hit the hull, a tremor like the ship groaning awake. The spirit scattered. The current stopped. Just like that, the water went still. The woman on the deck faded like mist, dissolving into the void. Sahil and I kicked upward, breathing hard. We didn't stop until we broke the surface beside Captain Hearn's boat. He hauled us on board, eyes wide. You saw them, didn't you? I nodded, ripping off my mask. They're still down there, I managed. Still reliving it. Sahil sat silent, staring at his hands. It wasn't a haunting, he whispered. No, I asked. He shook his head. It was a repetition. A moment trapped in water and memory, like the sea itself refuses to release them. Hearn crossed himself. Sophia keeps her dead. Back in Juneau, we dried off, checked our recordings, and set up base in a small Airbnb near the docks. At 1 a.m., Sahil broke the silence. I felt her hand, he said, quietly. The woman. She reached to the water, and I felt cold fingers touch my cheek. I put a hand on his shoulder. You okay? He hesitated. She wasn't malicious, he said. He swallowed. She was begging. The others, too. Over and over, like they don't know they're dead. We'll figure it out, I said. But he shook his head. No, we won't. He looked toward the window where the night pressed close, like frost. They've been calling out for 100 years, and no one's answered. We reviewed our notes, maps, and what little environmental data we could trust. The wreck was just the first piece. We needed to follow the story to where the tragedy continued. Juneau's old morgue, the drugstore that housed over 100 recovered bodies. Tomorrow, I said, closing my notebook. So we see what's waiting for us there. Sahil nodded slowly. And whatever we find, he whispered, let's pray they found more peace on land than they did in the sea. But something told me they hadn't, and that the dead of the Princess Sophia were far from done with us.
Man.
Well, you ready for part two?
Part two?
There's part two.
Oh, man. This is going to be a very long episode. Okay.
I'm sorry. I thought it was going to be short, but then I got too busy looking at my notes and I lost track. And
No worries. Let's do part two. But we probably won't have time to record 2 episodes.
That's fine. We'll record another one tonight, guys. Don't worry. We'll get your footage.
Sounds good. All right.
All right. Episode 9, the Juneau morgue. The living fear death. The dead fear being forgotten. Will. The old drugstore sits on a quiet street in Juneau, wedged between a modern law office and a donut shop. Most people walk by without ever knowing what happened here, but the building remembers. As soon as we stepped inside, the air changed, colder, heavier, as if pressed down by invisible hands. The floorboards creaked in slow, irregular rhythms, like someone pacing just out of sight. This place feels wrong, I muttered. Sahil ran a hand along the wall. No, it feels occupied. The clerk who let us in, a local historian named Porter, locked the door behind us. They processed 117 bodies here, he said quietly. Lay them out on ice blocks, right where you're standing. Sahil stiffened. I squeezed his shoulder. Let's set up. Within 15 minutes, we had EMF sensors along the walls, 2 thermal cameras, an EVP recorder on the old counter, my personal tape recorder in the back room. The building felt like a throat waiting to speak. Porters led to the back room, the space that once held the makeshift morgue tables. He pointed at a section of old plaster. Faint carvings covered it. Those were made by the volunteers, he said. Names, ages, notes. Some of the dead were unidentified when they arrived. Sahil leaned close. These weren't carved with knives, he whispered. More like fingernails. A chill ran straight through me. You're sure the volunteers made them? Porter hesitated, then shook his head. No, I'm not. The first sign. While Sahil cataloged the carvings, I walked the perimeter with the EMF meter. It pulsed softly, once, twice, then spiked so hard the needle hit the stop. A cold wind swept through the room, but none of the doors were open. Behind us, something fell. A name tag had slid off the wall and landed face up on the morgue table replica Porter kept for historical displays. Victoria Campbell, age 9. Saw his voice trembled. That wasn't on the floor earlier. I picked up the tag. It was freezing to the touch. We don't touch anything else, I said. Not until we know if they're trying to show us something or warn us. We shut off the lights at 9 p.m., let the building settle, waited, listened. At 9:23 p.m., the first footsteps echoed. Slow, dripping, bare feet on wood. Sahil clenched his Bible. You hear that, right? I hear it. The footsteps moved towards the front counter, then stopped abruptly. The EVP recorder clicked. A voice whispered across the static. It's cold. Another voice joined in. Help. Then a chorus, dozens overlapping, desperate, pleading. Remember us. Don't leave us. We're still here. Sahil closed his eyes. Lord have mercy. At 10:01 p.m., the thermal camera in the back room picked up a figure. Small, child-sized, standing near the morgue table. I moved toward the doorway slowly. Sahil followed, though everything in his posture said he didn't want to. The figure grew clearer as we approached. A bright blue shape on the monitor, meaning cold. Very cold. A child's outline. I whispered, Victoria? The air shifted. Cold swept over my face like a wave. Then the faint sound of small feet running past us, but nothing touched the floor. Something tugged softly at Sahil's sleeve. He gasped. She's trying to hold my hand. I turned on my recording device. Victoria, what do you want us to do? A pause. Or I turned on my recording device. Victoria, what do you want us to do? A pause. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. And a voice, tiny, trembling, came through the recorder. Tell them we didn't mean to die. The next 30 minutes were chaos. The EMF reader sensors all triggered at once. The floor groaned like the building was sinking. Whispers laid over each other, forming a wall of sound, not angry but frantic. Sahil covered his ears. They're reliving it, he shouted. Over and over. The cold, the sinking, they're trapped in the moment. Then how do we stop it? I yelled back. A heavy thud answered. Another name tag had fallen on the table. Then another. Then 10 more. The spirits weren't trying to scare us. They were begging. They wanted their names spoken. They wanted their story remembered. They wanted out of the dark. Sahil, I said, you still know the prayers for the dead? Yes? Then say them. Sahil stepped into the center of the room. He opened his Bible, his voice shaking at first, gained strength. Requiem aeternam done eas domin. The lights flickered. The air trembled. Soft weeping echoed from the walls. Et lux perpetua lucet eas. A burst of freezing wind circled the room once, then lifted like breath exhaled after a century. The footsteps stopped. The whispers faded, and the building felt lighter, peaceful. For the first time since we walked in, the silence wasn't oppressive. It was calm, settled. Sahil lowered the Bible slowly. They're gone. I nodded, maybe for the first time since 1918. We packed up quietly. No jokes, no banter. Only the weight of history settling in our bones. Just before we left, I found a scrap of paper tucked under the morgue table. Old, fragile, written in shaky ink. Tell them we were loved. I folded it gently. Let's take it to the museum, I said. Make sure her name, all their names, don't disappear. Saho put a hand on my arm. Will, I think that's all they wanted. Outside, the night air felt warmer. The street lights hummed. Life moved on. But behind us, the old building stood still. Finally quiet. Finally empty. Finally at rest. The investigation was over. The dead could sleep. And so, for once, could we. There you go. Thanks for enjoying this roller coaster of a ride, guys. I'm sorry it took me 5 hours to get through it all.
No worries, no worries. Hey, we had about 30 minutes of history and then 30 minutes of other stuff. But hey, nearly an hour-long episode. I don't think we've... When was the last time we had an episode this long?
The Solder Children.
That's right, yeah, because that one also had a lot of...
There's going to be... I want to tell you guys, there's going to be, hopefully, with longer stuff, I think we're trying to dabble a little bit more into being more thorough with our investigations and more thorough with our research. And so there might be some of these longer episodes. And I think me and Steven, we can put out 30-minute episodes that are quick, straight to the point, good info, good storytelling. But there's sometimes where we have these where there's a lot of history, a lot of stuff. It takes us time to kind of make sure we get all the research right.
Sure.
So bear with us. I mean, this might be our second worst episode, but hey, might be one of the best. Who knows? But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Anything you want to say? Anything you got to comment, add?
If your ship is sinking, maybe leave it. So, which I get why they didn't, but I don't know. I'm still just like, man, like you're just gonna stay on the ship as it sinks. So,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. Have fun, guys.
Thank y'all, and watch out for those rocks.
Oh yeah.
They don't rock.